Princess Amara sat alone in her royal chambers, her eyes gazing out of the tall windows that overlooked the grand city below. The streets were busy, filled with life and movement, but inside the palace a cold silence surrounded her. The once proud princess now felt like a shadow of her former self. She had been the hope of her kingdom, the chosen bride to unite two great factions. Her marriage had been arranged long before she was born. It was meant to be a bond that would bring peace and power, not just for her family, but for the entire galaxy. The union was supposed to secure her place in history, but now everything had fallen apart. The prince, the one she had been promised to, had rejected her. The wedding day had started with excitement, but it ended in public shame. In front of the entire kingdom, Prince Zarek had stood and called her unworthy. He said she did not meet his expectations and that he could not marry her. His words felt like a knife through her heart. The crowd had gasped, and the weight of their disappointment pressed down on her dot. Since that moment, things had changed. Amara had become a symbol of failure. No longer was she the admired princess, the one everyone looked up to. Now she was someone to be pitied. Her parents, who had once been so proud of her, now only looked at her with sadness in their eyes. The kingdom that had once cheered for her now whispered behind her back. Amara had spent years preparing for this moment, studying, training, learning the ways of diplomacy and royal life. She had worked hard to become the perfect match for Prince Zarek, but in the end it had all been in vain. She had been judged for her appearance, her behavior, and her family's legacy, but never for who she truly was inside. And now, with everything falling apart, she felt empty. She wondered if she had any value left. Her title, her status, seemed meaningless now. What was the point of being a princess if she could not even succeed at the most important job of her life? The rejection, the whispers of failure, had stripped away her sense of worth. She longed to be more than just a royal figure. She wanted to be seen for who she really was. Amara sat quietly in the room, lost in her thoughts. The luxurious surroundings of the palace, the fine fabrics, the golden decorations, all felt like they were mocking her. The walls that once seemed so full of life now felt like a prison. Every day was the same, a blur of royal duties, polite conversations, and people who only cared about her for her title, but inside she felt hollow. The weight of her failure was heavy on her shoulders, and she didn't know how to escape it. How could she move on? How could she rebuild her life when everything had crumbled in an instant? Her mind wandered back to the day of the wedding. Prince Zarek's words echoed in her mind. He had called her weak. He had said she was not the one he had expected, that she was a disappointment. Those words had pierced deeper than she ever could have imagined. She had tried to be strong, but in that moment she had felt so small, so insignificant. The door to her chamber opened with a soft creak, interrupting her thoughts. A royal guard entered, holding a message in his hand. "Princess Amara," the guard said, bowing respectfully. "A visitor has come. He wishes to speak with you." Amara looked up, slightly surprised. A visitor? She hadn't been expecting anyone. The royal family was busy with matters of state, and she had not invited anyone to visit. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with curiosity. The guard hesitated for a moment before responding. "A human diplomat. His name is Jack Tanner." "He wishes to speak with you, Your Highness? A human diplomat?" Amara raised an eyebrow. It was rare for humans to be involved in royal matters. They were often seen as outsiders, not part of the elite circles of the galaxy. What could a human possibly want with her? And why would he come all the way here to see her? "Is this a difficult time for you?" Amara was taken aback. Sympathy from a human? She wasn't sure what to say. She had expected him to be like all the others, someone who only cared about her title, about her royal duties. But his words were different. They were kind, sincere. "Why would you feel sorry for me?" Amara asked, her voice tinged with confusion. "I'm nothing more than a failure, an embarrassment to my family and my kingdom." Jack gave her a soft smile, one that seemed to reach his eyes. "That's not true. Sometimes things don't go as we planned, but that doesn't mean we failed." It just means we need to look at things differently. Amara didn't know how to respond. His words felt strange, almost as if he was speaking to her as a person, not a princess. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a flicker of something inside her, a spark of hope. "Thank you," she said quietly, "but I don't know if I can believe that." Jack nodded, his expression gentle. "I know it's not easy. But sometimes the greatest things come from the most unexpected places. You just have to be willing to see it." Amara watched him leave, the weight of his words lingering in her mind. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to her life than what she had believed. The days after Jack Tanner's visit felt strange to Princess Amara. She couldn't get his words out of her mind. The greatest things come from the most unexpected places. She found herself repeating them over and over, wondering what they meant. For the first time since her wedding day, Amara began to question everything. She had spent her life in a cage of royal duties, expected to play her part perfectly, but her heart had never been part of the plan. It had been a long time since she had felt like a real person, rather than just a royal figure on display. The disappointment from her failed engagement still stung, but Jack's words had started to chip away at the thick walls she had built around herself. The following week, she found herself walking through the palace gardens, something she hadn't done in ages. It had always been her favorite place to escape to when she was a child, and for some reason it felt like the right place to think. The flowers bloomed brightly in the sunlight, the sweet scent of roses and jasmine filling the air. But even the beauty of the garden couldn't block the thoughts racing through her mind. Amara paused at the edge of the garden, looking out at the distant view of the kingdom. It was a breathtaking sight, one she had often admired, but today it felt different. She was tired of being controlled, of living her life for others. She wanted to be free, to make her own choices, to find her own path. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel so alone in that thought. As she turned to leave, she saw Jack Tanner again. He was standing by the garden gate, his dark eyes watching her with a quiet curiosity. She hadn't expected to see him so soon, but there he was, standing as if he had been waiting for her. "Princess Amara," Jack said, bowing slightly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I thought I might find you here. The gardens are a peaceful place." Amara felt a slight surprise at his words. How did he know she would be here? But instead of questioning him, she smiled faintly. "No, you're not disturbing me," she replied. "I come here sometimes to think. It's the only place where I don't feel like, well, a royal burden." Jack raised an eyebrow but said nothing, choosing instead to step closer. "If you don't mind me asking, what's been on your mind, Your Highness?" Amara hesitated for a moment. She had never been one to share her thoughts with others, especially not someone like Jack, but something about him made her feel like she could trust him, even though he was a human. He wasn't part of the royal court, and yet he had spoken to her with a kind of honesty she had rarely heard before. "A failure. Sometimes things don't go the way we plan, but that doesn't mean you've let anyone down. You're still you, and you still have the power to change your own future." Her heart beat faster at his words. She wanted to believe him, but it was hard. The weight of her royal duties, the burden of her past choices, seemed too heavy to let go of. "But what if I don't know who I really am anymore?" she asked, looking down at the ground. "I've spent my whole life being what others wanted me to be." Jack stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Then maybe it's time to start figuring that out for yourself. Who are you, Princess Amara? Not as a royal, but as a person?" She blinked, taken aback by the question. She had never really asked herself that before. Who was she without the crown, without the expectations? She had been so focused on doing what others expected that she had forgotten to ask herself what she wanted. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice soft. "I've always been the princess. The one who had to marry for peace. The one who had to live up to a perfect image." Jack smiled warmly, a smile that reached his eyes. "You don't have to be perfect. No one does. We all make mistakes, but that doesn't mean we're failures. It just means we're human." The words struck her like a sudden gust of wind. Human. She had never really thought about humans that way before. She had always seen them as simple, lesser beings. But Jack wasn't just any human. He was kind, wise, and spoke with an understanding that felt so ... different from everyone else around her. For the first time in a long while, Amara felt a shift inside her. Maybe she didn't have to be perfect. Maybe she could still make a difference, still find happiness, even if it wasn't the kind of life everyone had expected for her. "I never thought of it that way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I do have a chance to change things, to do something for myself." Jack nodded, his gaze steady. "I think you do. You just have to believe it." Amara stood there, staring at him. For the first time in ages, she felt like she was seeing the world with new eyes. It was as if Jack had given her a glimpse of something she hadn't dared to dream about: hope. And it made her wonder if, perhaps, there was a different life waiting for her. A life where she didn't have to be a perfect princess, but just herself. "Thank you," she said, her voice full of gratitude. "I think I needed to hear that." Jack smiled again, a small, knowing smile. "Anytime, princess, anytime." As he turned and walked away, Amara stood still for a moment, letting the words settle in her heart. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could change her own path. Days passed since Jack Tanner's visit, and the words he had spoken to Princess Amara lingered in her thoughts. Each time she walked through the palace halls, each time she gazed out at the kingdom, she felt something stir inside her, a spark of hope, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Could it be possible that she wasn't a failure? That there was more to her life than her title and her royal duties? The weight of her past seemed a little lighter now, but it still hung over her. The rejection from Prince Zarek was fresh in her mind, like a wound that had never fully healed. But as she walked through the garden one afternoon, a place where she often came to think, she realized something important. She had been living for others her entire life, living for the kingdom, for her family, for the expectations placed upon her. But what if she could live for herself? Amara sat on a bench in the garden, staring at the peaceful flowers around her. It was a quiet place, a sanctuary where no one could find her. She had come to this spot many times, but today it felt different. For the first time, she was truly thinking about what she wanted, not what others expected from her. The sound of footsteps brought her back to reality. She turned and saw Jack approaching, his calm expression still as welcoming as it had been the first time they met. He walked with a quiet confidence, but his eyes held a warmth that made her feel at ease. "Princess Amara," he said, bowing his head slightly in respect. "Jack," she replied, offering a small smile. "What brings you here today?" He sat beside her on the bench, looking out at the garden. "I thought you might want some company. I know it's been a difficult time for you, and sometimes it helps to talk to someone." Amara nodded. She had never felt comfortable talking about her emotions with anyone, especially not with someone from outside the royal circle, but with Jack, it was different. His kindness and understanding made her feel as if she could trust him. She had never known a human like him. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice soft. "You were right, about changing my path, about not being perfect. I've spent my life trying to live up to others' expectations, and I forgot what it felt like to live for myself." Jack turned to her, his eyes filled with encouragement. "It's never easy to break free from what's expected of us, but it's important to know that you have the power to choose your own future. You don't have to be who others want you to be, you just have to be true to yourself." Amara's heart warmed at his words. For so long she had felt trapped in a world that demanded perfection, a world where her every move was scrutinized. But Jack's kindness, his belief in her, made her feel like she could finally breathe again. "I never thought I could be happy again after what happened with Prince Zarek," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But with you make me believe that there's more to life than just being a princess. Maybe there's more to me than just the crown." Jack smiled gently, his voice steady. "Of course there's more to you. You're not defined by a title. You're defined by who you are inside. And that's what makes you special." Amara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. That moment, she realized something she hadn't. Before, she didn't have to follow the path laid out for her. She could make her own decisions, choose her own future. It was terrifying, but it was also exciting. For the first time in her life, she felt like she could be free. "Thank you, Jack," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for showing me that I have a choice. For showing me that I can be more than just a princess." Jack smiled, a look of genuine warmth in his eyes. "You're welcome, princess. I'm just glad I could help." As they sat together in the quiet garden, Amara felt a sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was no longer just a royal figure in a cage. She was a person with hopes and dreams, with the power to change her life, and maybe, just maybe, Jack Tanner, the human who had seen her for who she truly was the one who had given her the courage to start that journey. Princess Amara stood at the balcony of her chambers, staring at the endless horizon as the last rays of the sun dipped behind the mountains. Her thoughts were far from the peaceful view in front of her. Her heart was tangled with emotions she had never expected to feel. The future of her kingdom and her own life seemed more uncertain than ever. The weight of her royal duties still hung over her, but now there was something else, something that filled her with both hope and fear. Jack Tanner had changed everything. Ever since he had entered her life, things had been different. He had spoken to her like a real person, not just a princess. He had shown her kindness, compassion, and most of all, belief in her ability to choose her own path. With him, she felt like she was more than just the daughter of kings. She felt seen, understood, and for the first time in her life, freed. But freedom came with a price. Amara's parents had made it clear what was expected of her. The marriage to Prince Zarek had been about more than love. It was about securing peace and unity between two great kingdoms. Now that the marriage had fallen apart, the fate of the kingdom seemed uncertain. The people had already started whispering about her failure, and the Council of Advisors had been putting pressure on her family to restore the royal image and secure a new alliance. Her parents, though supportive, were still disappointed. They had hoped for a different future, a future that would have secured her place among the most powerful families in the galaxy. But now they were waiting for her to make her move, to choose a path that would keep the kingdom strong and intact. Amara felt torn. She knew what was expected of her. She had been trained all her life to be a princess, to marry for the sake of peace, and to serve the needs of her people. But now she felt like there was more to her life than those responsibilities. She had the chance to choose something different, to choose happiness, even if it meant stepping away from everything she had known. Jack had been patient with her, never pushing but always supporting her. He believed in her, and in turn she began to believe in herself. But the decision she had to make was no simple one. Could she really walk away from the expectations of her family and her people? Could she abandon the very role she had been raised to fulfill? As if reading her mind, Jack had said to her the day before, "You don't have to choose between your kingdom and your happiness. You can have both, but you'll have to fight for it. And sometimes that means taking risks." Amara had thought about those words long into the night. Could she take the risk? Could she walk away from the role she had spent her whole life preparing for? The weight of her duty felt unbearable, yet the thought of continuing to live in a cage of expectation felt even worse. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see a servant standing at the threshold, a letter in her hand. "Your Highness," the servant said with a bow, "there is a message for you." From the council, Amara's heart sank as she took the letter. She already knew what it would say. The council was demanding that she choose a new suitor, someone who could restore the political alliance her marriage to Prince Zarek had broken. It was the same message she had been hearing for days, but today it felt more suffocating than ever. The letter contained a list of possible candidates, all powerful men from neighboring kingdoms, each one more influential than the last. But as Amara scanned the names, she couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. She knew what she was expected to do, but she also knew that none of these men could offer her what she truly wanted. They were all just pieces in a political game. None of them could offer her the chance to be free, to live her life as she saw fit. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. There was only one person who made her feel truly alive, Jack, but choosing him would mean defying everything she had been taught, everything she had been trained for. It would mean stepping away from her royal responsibilities and leaving behind the family that had raised her, but as she looked at the letter again, she realized something. She had spent her entire life living for others. Now it was time to live for herself. Jack had given her the courage to believe in her own strength. The decision would be difficult, but it was hers to make. Amara placed the letter down on the table and turned toward the window. The sun had set, and the sky was now painted with shades of purple and gold. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. The road ahead would not be easy, but she was ready to walk. She knew what she had to do. She would not marry for politics, not again. She would not live the rest of her life as a pawn in someone else's game. She would follow her heart, even if it meant breaking from tradition and the expectations of her kingdom, and Jackie was her future. She had no doubt about that. The sound of a familiar voice broke her thoughts. "Amara," Jack said softly, stepping into the room. "I've been waiting for you." She turned to face him, her heart beating faster. "Jack," she whispered. "I've made my decision." He stepped closer, his eyes full of hope. "What will you do?" "I'm going to choose my own path," Amara said, her voice steady. "I won't marry for politics. I'll follow my heart, and I want you to be part of that journey." Jack smiled, and for the first time in a long time, Amara felt a sense of peace. She had chosen her future, and with Jack by her side, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Princess Amara had never felt the weight of her crown as heavily as she did now. The decision to follow her heart was not an easy one, and as she walked through the palace halls, she could feel the eyes of the court on her. They were watching her every move, whispering among themselves. The royal family was not pleased with her choice, and the council was furious, but Amara had made up her mind. She would no longer live for the kingdom's expectations. She would not follow the path that had been laid out for her since birth. She would choose her own future, and that future, she knew, included Jack Tanner, the human diplomat who had made her believe in herself again. She couldn't help but think of all the years she had spent trying to be the perfect princess. Her life had been filled with rules, regulations, and traditions. She had been taught to act in ways that pleased her family, to marry for the good of the kingdom, and to always put the needs of her people before her own. But where had that gotten her? A broken engagement, a lost sense of self, and a future that seemed empty. As Amara entered the council room, she could feel the tension in the air. Her parents, the king and queen, were seated at the head of the table, their faces stern. The council members, the advisors who had once treated her like a precious asset, now looked at her with judgment and disappointment. "She countering your family and your kingdom." Amara's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. "I am not dishonoring anyone. I am choosing my own path. I am not just a pawn in a game of politics. I am a person with feelings, with dreams, and with the right to make my own choices." Her mother's face softened, but the sadness in her eyes was clear. "Amara, you were always meant for greatness. You were meant to bring peace and unity, to be the queen who would guide our kingdom into a prosperous future." "I don't want to be a queen who is bound by the chains of tradition," Amara replied, her voice filled with determination. "I want to be a person who makes her own decisions. I want to be with someone who loves me for who I am, not for what I can do for the kingdom." Her father's eyes narrowed. "And who is this person? This human who you have chosen over the future of our kingdom?" Amara felt a surge of warmth in her chest at the thought of Jack. "His name is Jack Tanner. He is a diplomat from Earth. He has shown me that there is more to life than titles and expectations. He believes in me, and he respects me for who I am, not just as a princess." The king shook his head in disbelief. "A human? A diplomat? Amara, this is madness." But Amara's mind was made up. She had spent her whole life living for others. Now it was time to live for herself. She had the power to choose her future, and she was not going to let fear or tradition hold her back. "I love him," she said quietly, her voice firm but filled with emotion. "And that is enough for me." The silence in the room was deafening. Her parents stared at her, their faces a mixture of shock, disappointment, and anger. They had always expected her to make the right choice, the one that would secure their place in history. But now, it was clear that their daughter was choosing something different. "I will not stay in this palace and be controlled anymore," Amara continued. "I will leave. I will be with Jack, and I will live my life as I choose." Her father stood up, his face hard with anger. "You are throwing away everything we've worked for. You are breaking the trust of your family and your kingdom." Amara stood tall, her eyes filled with resolve. "Maybe it's time for a change. Maybe the kingdom needs to see that a princess doesn't have to be perfect. She doesn't have to live her life according to the rules of the past." Her mother stood and walked toward her, her expression softer now, though still filled with sadness. "Amara, please. You don't understand the consequences of your actions. You are throwing away a future that could bring peace to so many." Amara's heart ached at her mother's words, but she knew she had made the right choice. "I understand better than you think. I have spent my whole life living for others. It's time for me to live for myself." She turned and walked out of the council room, her heart pounding in her chest. She had made the most difficult decision of her life, but for the first time, she felt free. She had broken the chains that had held her captive for so long. And with Jack by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. The journey from the palace had not been easy. Princess Amara had left behind everything she had ever known, her royal life, her family, and the expectations that had been placed on her since the day she was born. But with Jack by her side, the weight she had carried for so long felt a little lighter. For the first time in years, she felt like she was making her own choices, living her own life. They had left the kingdom, traveling to Earth. Amara had never been to Earth before, but Jack's world felt strangely peaceful. It was nothing like the grand palace she had come from, yet it felt more like home than the palace ever had. She could breathe here, she could laugh here, she could be herself. Here, however, despite the freedom she had found, the past was never far behind. Amara knew that eventually the kingdom would come looking for her. Her parents had not taken her departure lightly. They were angry, disappointed, and determined to bring her back into the fold of the royal family. They had sent letters, messengers, and even royal envoys to try to convince her to return, but she had stayed firm in her decision. But now, the time had come. The royal family was not going to let her go without a fight. One afternoon, as Amara sat in the small garden of the Earth home she shared with Jack, a messenger arrived. He was from the royal palace, carrying a letter sealed with the royal insignia. Amara's heart sank when she saw it. She had known this day would come, but the reality of it still hit her like a wave. She took the letter, breaking the seal with shaky hands, and unfolded the paper inside. The words were clear. Her parents wanted her to return immediately. They had sent an envoy to bring her back, and they were willing to negotiate for her future. But if she refused, there would be consequences. The kingdom could not afford to lose the alliance her marriage had promised, and they would not tolerate defiance from their princess. The weight of the letter felt heavy in her hands. She stood in the garden for a long time, staring at the words. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. She had chosen her own path, and in doing so she had found peace. But now the past was calling her back. Her parents wanted her to be the perfect princess again, to return to the life she had left behind. Jack found her standing there, the letter still in her hands. He could see the storm of emotions on her face. "Amara," he said softly, stepping closer to her, "what's wrong?" She turned to him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "They want me to come back," she said, her voice trembling. "They're sending someone to bring me back to the palace. My parents. They think I made a mistake." Jack took the letter from her hands and read it quietly. When he finished, he looked at her with calm eyes. "What do you want to do?" Amara hesitated. She could feel the pull of her past, the expectations, the pressure to be the perfect princess. But she had made her decision. She had chosen Jack, and she had chosen to live for herself, not for others. "I don't want to go back," she said, her voice steady now. "I've lived my life for others long enough. I can't go back to that life, to a life where I'm told what to do at every turn." Jack smiled, his eyes full of understanding. "Then you don't have to go back. You found your path, Amara, and I'm here to walk it with you, no matter what." Amara's heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time in her life, she felt truly understood. Jack had never tried to change her or pressure her to be something she wasn't. He had accepted her for who she was, and in doing so, he had helped her find the courage to stand up for herself. "But my family," she said, her voice faltering. "I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to lose them, but I can't go back to being the person they want me to be." Jack took her hands in his grip strong and reassuring. "You don't have to choose between them and yourself. But you can't live your life for them, Amara. You have to live for you. And if they truly love you, they'll understand." Amara looked at him, and for the first time, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had made her decision, and it wasn't an easy one. But with Jack by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to be the perfect princess, the perfect daughter, or the perfect future queen. She could just be herself. "I'm not going back," she said firmly, her voice full of conviction. "I'm going to stay here with you. I'm going to live the life I've always dreamed of, even if it means leaving the kingdom behind." Jack smiled. His eyes filled with pride. "You're stronger than you know, Amara, and no matter what happens, I'll be with you." In that moment, Amara realized something important. She didn't need the approval of her parents or the kingdom. She didn't need to be the perfect princess. She just needed to be true to herself, and with Jack by her side, she knew that whatever came next, she would be ready. Amara sat by the window, watching the first rays of dawn break through the sky. The world outside was still and peaceful, the quiet hum of the morning filling the air. It had been weeks since she had made the decision to leave her life behind, weeks since she had chosen Jack and her own happiness over the expectations of the royal family. And yet, in all that time, the one thing that hadn't changed was the weight of the past still lingering in her heart. The royal family had not given up on her. Despite her refusal to return to the palace, her parents had sent envoy after envoy, urging her to come back. They had made promises about peace, about forgiveness, and about her future. But Amara knew better now. She knew that returning to the life they had planned for her meant returning to a cage, a life of never being able to choose for herself. The messages from the palace had become less frequent, but the pressure was still there. The thought of facing her family again, of seeing their disappointment in her eyes, was enough to make her stomach tighten. She could feel the weight of her choice settling heavily on her. But she also knew she could not go back. "Amara," Jack's voice broke her. "Thoughts." She turned to find him standing in the doorway, his expression gentle but serious. "We need to talk." Jack stepped inside the room, closing the door behind him. He looked at her with a mixture of concern and resolve. "Your family. They've been making arrangements. They've asked me to deliver a message to you." Amara's heart sank. She knew what this meant. "What do they want?" Jack hesitated before speaking. "They want you to return, Amara. They've offered to forgive you, to bring you back into the fold of the royal family. They even said they would accept your decision to choose your own future, as long as you come back to the palace." Amara's mind raced. It was exactly what she had feared. They were trying to pull her back, to convince her that everything would be fine if she just returned. But the idea of going back to the palace, of being forced into a life that wasn't hers, filled her with dread. She shook her head, her voice firm. "I can't go back, Jack. I've made my choice. I won't live for them anymore." "I won't live for anyone but myself." Jack nodded, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I know you've made your choice, and I support you, but it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to face the consequences of that decision." "Amara." felt a pang in her chest. She knew Jack was right. She had made her choice, but that didn't mean it would be without its challenges. There were people who loved her, people who expected her to come back and fix everything. And there was the kingdom itself, which was in turmoil because of her actions. I don't want to disappoint them, Jack, she said quietly. I don't want to hurt my family. But I can't keep living their dream for me. I have to live my own life. Jack stepped closer to her, taking her hand in his. Amara, you've already made the hardest decision of your life, but you don't have to face it alone. I'm here, and I will always be here. Amara looked into his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm. She had made her choice, and she had chosen to be with the one person who made her feel like she was truly alive. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to live up to the impossible standards of royalty. She just needed to be true to herself. Thank you, Jack, she whispered. I don't know what I would do without you. Jack smiled softly, his thumb brushing gently over her hand. You'll never have to find out, Amara. We're in this together. The words were simple, but they meant everything to her. She had spent so many years feeling like a failure, like she wasn't enough. But now, with Jack by her side, she felt stronger than she ever had before. She knew she could face whatever came next, no matter how difficult it might be. That night, as they sat together in their small home, Amara found herself thinking about the future. It was uncertain, yes, but it was hers to shape. She didn't need anyone's approval, not anymore. She had her own dreams now, her own plans. And with Jack, she knew she could build a life that was truly hers. Her thoughts were interrupted when there was a knock at the door. She and Jack exchanged a look, both of them unsure of who it could be. Jack stood up and opened the door, and when he saw who it was, his expression softened. The person standing in the doorway was her mother. Amara's heart skipped a beat as she stood up, her mind racing. She hadn't expected this. Her mother was the last person she had expected to show up here, far from the royal palace. Mother, Amara said, her voice hesitant. Her mother's eyes softened as she looked at her daughter. Amara, she said quietly, I've come to speak with you. I know we've had our differences, but I need you to understand something. Amara felt a lump form in her throat as she looked at her mother. She had never expected to see her here, in this place, so far from the kingdom. But as her mother stepped inside, Amara realized that just maybe there was a chance for reconciliation. Perhaps the future wasn't as uncertain as she had thought. Perhaps the past didn't have to define her. I'm listening. Mother, Amara said, her voice steady but full of emotion. Her mother took a deep breath and looked at Jack. I've come to say that I understand. I understand that you have your own path to walk. And while it may not be the one I would have chosen, I see now that it is yours. I'm here to support you, Amara. Tears welled in Amara's eyes as her mother spoke. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone in her choice. For the first time, she felt that she had her mother's blessing. Not just her approval. Jack stepped back, giving the two women space. Amara and her mother stood there looking at each other. The distance between them, both physical and emotional, began to fade. You have my blessing, Amara, her mother said softly. Go and live the life you've chosen. I will support you. Amara felt a weight lift off her shoulders as she heard her mother's words. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a start. And that was all she needed. With Jack by her side and her mother's support, Amara knew she could face whatever the future held. For the first time, she felt at peace with her choice. She had found her own path, and it was one that was hers alone.